if you're in a blended family, you probably heard the phrase, God hates divorce. And that was never my ideal or my plan. I grew up in the church and knew that was something I didn't want to do. And so there was just so much guilt with the idea of this isn't working. And how do I make this work? And just getting caught in this endless loop of this isn't working. How do I make this work? God hates divorce, and going over and over and over again.
From the Family Life Podcast Network, this is Family Life Blended. I'm Ron Deal. This donor-supported podcast helps blended families and those that love them pursue the relationships that matter most. I'm so glad you've joined us in this journey. Welcome to episode number 59, Conversations to Improve Your Family. Have you ever sat down at dinner with your spouse or your family and you thought, we should probably talk about something important, something significant. And then you did what I've done 1,000 times, came up with nothing to talk about? Well, we want to help you with that on this episode of Family Life Blended. Jed and Jenny Jurchenko have supported thousands of couples in taking small positive steps to grow their most important relationships through a series of books called 131 Conversations. Jed is a therapist and coach, and Jenny a social worker. They have a blended family with 4 children and occasionally some foster children. In this episode, we're talking about their book, 131 Conversations for Stepfamily Success. Jed, Jenny, you guys in your book, 131 Conversations for Stepfamily Success, it's designed to get couples and families talking together. We're going to come back to that a little bit later because I think it's fairly creative the way you've gone about this. But let's just start with this. In the book, you guys say that blended families have joy, love, and a host of challenges, and that your family is no different. I'm curious. I'd love to hear about it. What are some of the joys? What are some of the challenges that you guys have experienced in your own family?
Yeah, so many of them, just in both ways. You mentioned challenges and big ones, little ones, and joys, and they both go together hand in hand. And just one of our favorite examples are holidays, vacations, Christmas, traditions. Just like regular families, we love those special days. And we very quickly found in a blended family, there's like bonus challenges too. One of them being, where on earth do you put all the stuff? Yeah. Blessing to have parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and bonus parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. And we were finding, even just with our girls, we were having great celebrations, great times together. And years later, we were still finding presents that were very thoughtful and that they would have enjoyed had they actually opened them, still sitting in their room.
Are you saying, wait, are you saying that some of the Christmas gifts didn't all get opened?
Don't tell their grandparents. But yeah, there was one year, and because we have a very actively involved, extended step family for my stepdaughters. And so it's, there was one Christmas that we had taken all the gifts and we just piled them up on the dining room table and thought, oh no, what are we going to do? So it is, there's those times of joy and celebration and just the being together. And that is so much fun, but also navigating, it is so many more relationships and how do you find time? How do you honor all of those different relationships? How do you, and then there's the complications of those relationships, I think some of the challenges for me as stepmom coming in was developing a relationship, not just with my in-laws, but with Jed's ex's parents and the girls' aunts and uncles on that side of the family. And, with their stepdad and those kind of relationships. We talk sometimes about relationships with your in-laws can be challenging, yes. Right? And with step families, there's so many more relationships to navigate.
Okay, so let's come back because I want to hear a little bit more about all those extended family relationships and how that, has created confusion and complexity for you guys. But set the stage for us. What's the backdrop to how your family came together? Who brought kids? How long have you been together at this point?
Now, we are getting ready to celebrate our ninth anniversary. So coming up on our 10th, we're counting down, but about a year and a half away. And really, our story started with me having two kiddos and meeting Jenny through an online dating site. And really just our first date. It's a story that I love to share because it was something that left a big impact on me. I hadn't seen Jenny before, and very first date was at a place called Village Pizzeria on Coronado Bay. And I didn't really know what to expect. And I remember standing up, first time I saw Jenny, my first thought was, whoa, thank you, eHarmony. And then we sat down, had dinner, and I was just struck by how kind Jenny was. Afterwards, I asked her if she would go for a walk with me. She said yes. My heart skipped a beat and turned out to be what was looking like the perfect evening. Two of us were walking along San Diego Bay, the sunset.
Sounds like a nice romantic setting there, buddy.
It was until that sunset, and it got cold quick. So we keep walking, and I look over a third time, and the way I remember this is not only is she shivering, goosebumps running up and down both arms, but I'm pretty sure she's turning blue too. So I ask a third time, and she just has this determination of, no, I'm fine. Let's keep going. I'm like, all right, we're going to keep walking. And afterwards, I couldn't stop thinking about this amazing woman who wanted to spend time with me more than she wanted to not be cold.
Now, the listeners don't know what I just saw, and that was Jenny's head was shaking like, no, I wouldn't turn it blue. That wasn't me. But yet there was something in there for you. You were chilled, but you were still willing to keep going.
Yes. I think that's kind of a part of our story too, is just that finding those meaningful connections and the conversation and being willing to kind of, step into that. And you, I think, exaggerate just a little bit. I mean, I am a Minnesota girl. It was California
It wasn't
cold.
that cold. If it's San Diego, it's not that cold for a Minnesota girl. Exactly.
But it was uncomfortable. And I think that is kind of the point is just being willing to be a little uncomfortable.
Okay, so Jed, you had two kiddos at that point when you guys met. How old were they at that time?
They were pretty young. So when we first met, my youngest she wasn't two yet. Because Jenny met her for the first time.
At her second birthday, yeah.
And then your oldest was how old?
So our oldest was 3.
Okay, all right. So they were young.
Yeah.
All right, good. And you guys have had some together, right?
Yes. So we have 2 more daughters, 4 girls.
So let me just loop all the way back to where we started our conversation. This extended family, holidays, birthdays, special days, and they're great, they're joyful, and at the same time, they're complex, and there's challenges embedded in all that. And I'm just wondering, Jenny, if there were times you felt like, wow, we're walking along together in this relationship and I'm getting cold because of some of the extended family, step family challenges. Does that metaphor work?
Yeah, I think it does. I've never thought about it that way, but yes.
Yeah. And you just kept going. Like, obviously, here you are 9 years in, you just kept going. I'm wondering if that's a word of encouragement to any step parent listening to us right now. Hey, sometimes it does get chilly along this romantic walk, and you still have to figure out a way to keep going. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think I would just echo that. And, I think especially as a stepmom coming in and trying to navigate all those different relationships, and you always have this idea in your head about what that's going to be like, right? And even as we were dating and thinking about what our married life would look like and what being a stepmom meant, I don't know that there's any real way to prepare for that. You just don't know until you know. So
right.
You can do all the research you want, and you just don't know until you're in it and you're experiencing it. And I think especially in those first few years of marriage, as you're you're building your life together, which carries so many complicating, things. You're getting to know each other. You're building your life together. And you have all these outside pressures of other people who are already involved in this family. Even when it gets cold, even when it can feel a little on the outside, like these family routines have already been established. And where is my place in this? And even when it gets to feel that way, like you're on the outside and it's a little cold, being willing to lean into that, being willing to kind of ride through that discomfort, and be a part of the process and kind of trust that process. Because I don't know if there's a real way to...
There is, because you said it.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things that you said. And can I share it?
Yeah.
So a couple years in, you said something to the effect of, I'm actually really thankful for all the challenges we went through.
Yeah.
Because they made us work together quick. We had to.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of my new favorite metaphors that you came up with, is cold, because you did the same thing in our relationship of, no, it's okay. Let's keep going. We're learning to work together quick.
Yep.
I've long suggested to blended family couples that you actually kind of need some of the challenges, because it's in the space of walking together when it gets chilly that you make decisions about how you're going to face that chill. It's there where you work out, how do we do Christmas when we've got all these people that are connected to us and the kids, and how do we manage this? And of course, there's lessons learned, failures, if you want to call it that. Well, that didn't work well. But that's how you develop your sense of togetherness for the next time. Like over time, you end up shaping your identity as a family unit and how we're going to work together, and the rough edges get smoothed off. And you find yourself as a family unit somewhere in the midst of those challenges. Okay, I see you guys nodding your head. It sounds like you can relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Those moments, even though they can be painful sometimes and chilly sometimes, they really, those early years and those challenges are really what have given us the strength to weather. And I think, just like Jed said, we really grew and we bonded, and there's really good things that came from those challenges. And those rough edges don't stay rough. They do get smoothed out, and we start to kind of find our places. And
it was a patient process and a lot of good communication. Because even going back to the gifts, you did something that was ingenious. I still remember that Christmas where you said, this is getting ridiculous. We've got all of this stuff, which in a way, it's a blessing. It's a great problem to have. We've got tons of people who love our girls. I've heard you say blended families don't have a family tree. They have a family forest. And certainly that resonated with us. And we're like, man, we've got all of these bonus family members. We've got bonus presents, bonus gifts. We don't know what to do with all of this. And then you said, our kiddos are also missing out on a lot of the experiences. And that was a year you said, I don't know if we can do this, but I'm going to email everybody and see if they would help contribute to some of these experiences we want for our girls to do. Some of the summer camps, the church camps, the ice skating lessons, all of that fun stuff. And see if they would do that in lieu of some of the physical stuff. And we didn't know. I think there was a little bit of anxiety of, are we going to offend somebody? Are they going to get on board? Is this even okay to do? And the cool thing is so many of them said yes, dove on board. And it's not quite as fun being a grandparent, giving a contribution as it is a physical toy. But for our girls, it gave them so much more value. And I think after doing that, really created a good partnership and was good for everybody.
Yeah, it alleviated a lot of our stress. They were very understanding about that. It allowed us to set that boundary a little bit. And it really did allow, sometimes I think in blended families, there's a little bit of guilt on the kids missing out on some things. And I think especially for us, where we're in a more high conflict, and so we have to navigate some of those issues. And because of that, sometimes that we'll kind of get that thought in our head that like, oh, well, we can't do this because we're doing other things instead. And it allowed us to bridge that gap a little bit and just kind of allow those opportunities. The grandparents get to be a part of that. And I think it allowed it for some connection with them in that way too, instead of just the stuff, it was really that shared experience that
Yeah.
the girls connect by sharing, like, oh, thank you so much for this camp experience or this retreat we got to go to, and sending pictures and talking about it. And it's created a lot of connection points for them as well.
That's really great. I know a lot of people listening right now are going, man, I wish we had that sort of support from our extended family, grandparents, different folks. Sounds like you guys were pretty proactive to invite those people in and to tell them what role they could play. Is that how you did that?
I think that was a process.
Uh-huh.
I think,
like you tried and it didn't work so well at first? Or
well,
what?
I think probably as stepmom, I was maybe had the hardest time navigating those relationships. There was probably some immaturity, to be honest, on my part early on in our marriage, where I kind of wanted this picture and I wanted these relationships were important to me. And I had a little bit of a wall. I don't know how to navigate a relationship with you. And so, we were polite, I think, to each other, but it was difficult for me to navigate that relationship. And so that came later. And I think luckily for us, like, they were very grace-filled in that. And there did become a time where there really wasn't a middleman for that relationship anymore. That
Really,
do we
you
say
had to
this
step
tactfully?
in. No, you had to step in, and you did a great job
Well,
doing that.
See, here's where it gets difficult to say, because at the time that Jed got full custody of the girls, and so the girls started living with us full time, those connections had to be facilitated through us. And so that was when a lot of work in those relationships happened.
So the change in circumstances sort of forced you into that space.
Yes.
And you had to figure it out. I'm caught by something you said a minute ago, Jenny, and I'd love for you to just unpack it for us. You said I was kind of immature at first about that. What would you say has been a maturing factor? I mean, what do you wish you would have had earlier on?
Oh, just being in a stance that's more open. I think I felt very territorial.
Okay.
This is my family, and I'm trying to find my space in it. I'm trying to create our marriage, our family, our life, and I don't want these outside influences. And I really wish that instead I had been more open. And I think part of that for me is I didn't have a lot of examples. I don't know a lot of other stepmoms, or I didn't. I do now, but I didn't at that time. So I didn't have a lot of healthy role models about what that could look like. There is a lot of information out there that can be very unhelpful for stepmoms, and very damaging to that, relationship. And then I think the way that stepmoms are portrayed and the way that I felt about my role as a stepmom, I wish going back that I had a better understanding and had felt more confident in that role, so that I didn't feel the need to be territorial and kind of holding my space tight without allowing other people to be a part of that. I think once we opened that door and we started navigating those relationships, what I found is it's just so much more acceptance than I had anticipated. Also, it took the focus off of me, and I saw how that impact was the impact that those relationships had on the girls, and how meaningful it was for them to see us connecting with all of their family.
So let me ask you to do one thing. Give me one concrete example of what that looked like when you were opening up and how that changed things. So just an example of that. And then Jed, I'd love for you to just comment from the husband point of view. Like, what did you see her do differently that you felt like was helpful?
I think for me, there had been a time in the past where we would be attending sporting events and things, and I would pull away or kind of distance myself from other people. And there came a time where we were able to sit together and kind of cheer on the girls. And eventually that morphed even into them. They routinely come and visit the girls. Our home is pretty open, to their family. And we really kind of communicate that that's our family. And even just reaching out, I think early on to it was kind of bridging the gap by making some phone calls and having some conversations and getting to understand, who they are and their hearts for the girls. And And truly, I can't think of one specific time where it was a big change. It was gradual, little things over time. It was little points of connection. Honestly, it was more them reaching out than it was me.
But it was you had to be open to them reaching out.
Yeah, but coming in a stance that was more open and receptive to that, and then reaching back, reciprocating that and reaching back
That's
out
good.
and being more open to that. I just wish we had done it a little sooner, but I think it was so powerful for the girls to see that relationship, and it really has been a blessing for our family.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I noticed is those small steps kind of stacking on top of the next, on top of the next, sitting together at the sporting events. Then when we moved to Minnesota, realizing, man, we've got to find a way for all of the family to stay in contact with the girls. So it was something as simple as friending everybody on social media and posting a ton of pictures of the girls as far as something practical. And it provided a great opportunity for that two-way reaching because grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins still write all sorts of comments on the pictures. We know they're engaged, and they're just those tiny connection moments that really matter and add up over time. And so there's, kind of that constant communication, but a lot of positive, good communication where we're cheering each other on, celebrating everything that's going right in the home. I think that makes a big difference is to have so many opportunities just to celebrate those little wins together. And then when we do get together, there's a lot to talk about. And there's that tone of, man, there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of fun stuff happening. And everybody knows what that is because we've invited each other in.
I think it also became a shift from some competitiveness between that back and forth on who gets the most time with the girls and those kind of things to really just understanding everyone's heart to spend time. And of course, part of our story is moving all the way from California to Minnesota. And, I think at that time we were mending bridges and building bridges really to this extended family. And so being able to be more empathetic too about the fear that they must have been feeling about the girls moving so far away, and how can we assure them that we understand how important they are in their lives. How can we reassure them? How can we start that process now? So it became, sending pictures, texting pictures, of them, keeping them involved before we left, and being intentional about that so that they had some reassurance that we're not taking the girls and running away from you.
That is huge. And especially after the move, continuing that connection through technology and trying to keep that positive climate alive. That really is the difference between a grace climate where, hey, we're connected to, where togetherness is valued here and we're reaching between homes. And what a different environment that message sends as opposed to possessiveness, which is about division, separateness, what we have versus who you are. Two totally different messages, two totally different climates. I can see how it's really improved things for you guys and for the girls. Okay, so we've been talking about some of your challenges. You outline a few challenges in this book. Past trauma, family overload, you call it, shame, blame, and guilt, and the pressure to blend. Let's just take those one at a time for a second. Past trauma, the families you work with and the people you're consulting with and the teaching that you're doing. What kinds of things are you thinking about there, and how does that impact the family's journey?
Yeah, that past trauma and shame, blame, and guilt, for me, those just blend together. And, I know there is, for me anyways, there was guilt of just that faith piece. We've all, if you're in a blended family, probably heard the phrase, God hates divorce. And that was never my ideal or my plan. I grew up in the church, attended seminary, and knew that was something I didn't want to do, didn't plan to do, and really wanted to stay away from. And having grown up in the church, and when I say grown up, I mean literally spent so much time there. My dad was a youth pastor that I learned to walk in the main sanctuary. And so there was just so much guilt with the idea of this isn't working, and how do I make this work? and just getting caught in this endless loop of this isn't working. How do I make this work? God hates divorce, and going over and over and over again, feeling this weight. I don't think it was intended, but that phrase, God hates divorce, which is right from the Bible, what my brain heard at the time was God hates divorce. You're moving that direction. God hates you.
Wow. Yeah. I've heard that from so many people, brother. And I cringe for people when they hear that. What was the impact on you? Guilt, shame. Yeah.
Guilt, shame, not proud of it, but did stop attending church for a year because I would go in feeling bad, leave feeling worse. Now we're very much back at church now, very active in the community. For those who have that shame, blame, and guilt, I like to use the metaphor of I hate car wrecks. There's not too many things worthy of hating.
Right. Who loves car wrecks? Nobody.
But if you're going to hate something, might as well be a car wreck, right?
Yeah, right.
And so I've got a almost 15-year-old daughter who keeps reminding me that she's soon going to be able to drive. And I pray she never gets in a car wreck. If she does, here's what I know for certain. First thing that happens when that car wreck happens is, man, I'm going to run up to her, give her the biggest hug, make sure she's okay. We can deal with the mess later. I don't care whose fault it is. All I want to know is, hey, are you okay? Let me comfort you right now. I want to be there.
Yeah, right.
I know I hate that car wreck because it's a mess to clean up no matter what. And I know I love you and care about you, and I'm so glad you're safe. And I wonder if that's not the same attitude that's kind of in there in that passage of I hate divorce, of God saying, man, I know this is just a massive, messy train wreck, and I'm running to you with my arms wide open because I want to know you're okay. And so that metaphor was something that helped me move on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that so much. I think that's really good. Of course, and if you're in a car wreck, you certainly don't love car wrecks. You didn't ask for this, want this, even if it was kind of your decision to file for divorce. I'm convinced people in that situation don't want it. They just don't know what else to do. And it comes to that, and they just feel like it's the only option. And so, of course, you don't like it. Let me just add a little commentary here for our listener for just a second. I, just like Jed, for years and years, quoted that verse, heard that verse taught and spoken of, and I always wondered, boy, how does that impact somebody who's in the middle of that? I'm quite convinced now that Malachi 2:16 does not say God hates divorce. I think it's a poor interpretation. And there's only one main Bible that still translates it that way. The NIV that used to translate it that way no longer does. So there is quite an insight that has developed in the world of biblical translation that is showing that it's really carrying the meaning of a man who hates his wife and divorces her, that it's the man who is showing hate, not hate in the sense of like we use the word in our day and time, but hate in the sense of does not love, is diminishing her value. In other words, he's putting her away and he's trading her in for a new model. That is exactly the context of Malachi 2. That's what the people were doing. Older men were getting rid of their wives or first wives and getting younger wives. And Malachi's calling them on the carpet for that and saying that's wrong and that's not what it's about. The point here being, I don't think the Bible teaches God hates divorce. We're going to dedicate a whole podcast coming up. We've got it planned. We're going to dedicate a podcast, so keep listening. We're going to spend more time fleshing this out. But even if the passage does say God hates divorce, I'm very positive he doesn't hate you. It's not valid to say that if God says keep your promises and don't break your promises, that's the meaning of I hate divorce and what it does to people. That does not mean that God hates the people who divorce. Rather, he loves you so much, his son came to die for us, and we can hold on to that. You guys in your book go on and talk about this spiritual shame and guilt thing, and you say, it caught me, couples are chided with this reminder. And sometimes that's just in conversation with other Christian people. Sometimes it is out of a sermon and the way the message is characterized. but they can't change their circumstances, as you point out. And so it's easy for people to feel like they're just being done under. And I'm struck by you walking away from church for a year, but that doesn't surprise me because I've heard that so many times from people. They feel marginalized, they feel like they don't belong, and so they just distance themselves from that space that makes them feel so guilty. What would you say to somebody who's listening right now, who's kind of under that heavy avalanche of negativity, and they're trying to dig their way out? What would you say to them?
Two things. One, God loves blended families. And two, you are not alone. And there's a quick story I've got to share about this. First time I was asked to speak about blended families at a family conference.
Okay.
And I remember the dean of our school emailing me and saying, "Oh, Jed, we want to have you. We want you to speak. I want you to speak about blended families. And if you want to speak about some other stuff, talk about that too." I thought, yes, I would love to speak. And I'm absolutely not talking about blended families. I'm like, I want to hide this away, And so I sent her my topics. And of course, none of them are about blended families because I'm like, I just don't want to go there because I'm feeling so much shame, blame, and guilt myself. And she emails me back and she's like, "Jed, that's great. Any one of those is fantastic. And I'm putting you down for blended families too." And so I was stuck. There was no way out. And I started diving into the research. And the more that I did, the more that I saw that blended families aren't new. They're in the Old Testament. They're all throughout the Bible. Sometimes look a little bit different than blended families today. But came to that realization of God loves blended families and just ran that thought over and over and over again in my mind. And during that first speaking session, Jenny was there with me, and we had maybe all of 6 people in the room. But I'm sitting there shaking, like just nervous because I'm feeling the weight. And it's hard to tell bits and pieces of my story. One thing I know that I'm going to open with is this line, "God loves blended families," because that was the one phrase that I was holding on to that was incredibly meaningful for me. And so we prayed, I looked up, and just opened with that phrase and immediately saw eyes in the room well up with tears.
Wow.
I was like, oh, I'm okay. This is a safe place. We got this.
And they needed to hear that too.
Yes. I probably needed to hear it again just as much as they did. But at that moment, I was like, we're in this together. God loves blended families. And for me, that was a huge turning point.
I imagine our listener needs to hear it again and again and again, just so that you can counter those lies from the evil one who just wants you to believe you're not enough. And that's just not the case. Jen, you talk about one of the challenges in your life in the blended family. It has to do with you being a stepmom and then having your first pregnancy, the first hours baby that you guys had together. And there was a moment there where you kind of realized, wow, all the firsts for me are seconds for Jed.
Yeah. Yep.
Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think there was kind of a moment where we were here in Minnesota and visiting my parents and just kind of in that first couple of months of pregnancy and talking about how our life was about to change and just the excitement of that. And my mom started talking about that moment of, when I am the oldest child and when they had me and watching each other become parents for the first time. And we all kind of paused. And I just kind of got this lump in my stomach because it was kind of, even though I knew, it just kind of hit me in a different way that we weren't going to get that moment exactly. And that Jed had already done that. He'd already been a parent twice. This was going to be his third. It was new for me, but not new for him. And so there was kind of a process of grieving a little bit. And I think that's true often in step parenting, that there are kind of like I said before, you just don't know until you know. when you're,
and then you wake up to those realities and you go, oh, here's another thing. We're not together in this.
Yes. So there can be a sense of feeling a little robbed sometimes of some of those
Yeah.
moments and some of those things that you want to share with your spouse. And I think it was a process then too of just kind of talking through with Jed how I was feeling about that, and then celebrating together, like really kind of hearing from him too what was different about this pregnancy and celebrating those things, and that even though it wasn't the first, it was our first, and being able to lean into those, and for me learning not to dwell on that too, that being able to move forward and work through that and not just sit in that discomfort and choose to stay there. So
I was just going to ask you, so how did you cope with that? And you said, so I have to tell myself not to sit in this, dwell on this, kind of ruminate. And I heard you say, really find joy in the things we could share together. The
absolutely.
parts of it that were unique to the two of you.
And I think that was really the key. There are things that are difficult about blended family life and just life in general. There's just times that life lifes you, and choosing, your stance and your attitude in that. You can choose to kind of stay focused on what am I missing out on, or what got taken from me, or, what kind of opportunities do I not have because of this situation? Instead, really learning to shift our focus and celebrate what we do have. And really, like we had mentioned before, that some of those challenges have made us stronger and connected us in a way that we wouldn't have been otherwise. And choosing to stay focused there and celebrating those victories together, those moments of joy and connection, and choosing to put our focus there.
Okay, guys, I want to turn the conversation and talk a little bit more about this book specifically, 131 Conversations for Step Family Success. You guys buy into something I also buy into as a writer, and that is, if I can get people talking, if I can get their conversations moving in a direction that is a healthy direction, and sometimes even about hard things, that ultimately they might be able to co-create some reality, some togetherness. And so obviously you've bought into this, and I could just tell our listener, this is not the only book Jed's written with 131 conversations. There's about 8,000 that he's put together. I don't know how many you've written, but this is one of a series, and it's just terrific to get people talking. Let's just talk around that for a minute. So the assumption here is that conversation will help move people towards some experience that deepens their relationships. What ultimately you're trying to accomplish by orchestrating these dialogues for people?
Yeah, that comes from our story. Before we were married and just started dating, I went out and got a conversation starter book and just went to Barnes and Noble and found something on the shelf. And we went through the questions just one by one. And on my part, it was partially intentional. One, I thought it would be a lot of fun. But two, sometimes when you are dating and trying to get to know somebody, there's those things you wonder, but it's kind of awkward to ask because you ask the question and then the other person is thinking, well, why is he asking that question? And so this book was my out. It was kind of that get out of jail free card, because now I'm not asking the question. Like, I'm just going through the conversation starters in the book.
It gives you an easy excuse to bring up stuff.
Yeah. And so we kind of made it the mission to go through every question in the book. We brought it with us. I think I kept it in the glove compartment of my car. And we took it on dinner dates, walks at the bay, coffee shops, really just anywhere we went, and went through those questions one by one by one, and had a lot of fun learning about each other, having that conversation, and knew since we were moving towards becoming a blended family, talking about all of this stuff ahead of time was going to be really important.
So you did that for yourselves and saw the benefit. So now you're turning out resources to help people do that for themselves.
Yeah, we really believe that having those conversations written down, it's a non-threatening way to be able to ask tough questions. And Jed really talks a lot about that connectication. So communicating for the purpose of connection. And probably that's the time that we feel the most connected, is when we're really sitting down and talking, intentionally setting aside time where we're really digging deep and we're still getting to know each other and learning, what kind of things have changed as far as our ambitions for the future, or our goals for each other and for ourselves, for our family, really being able to dive in deep. And we just desire for other couples to be able to connect in that way.
Well, I got to say, I really appreciate the effort here because I buy into this too. Just last week, my wife and I, we flew to a retreat location where we are going to spend the weekend with some couples talking about their families. And we went a day ahead of time so Nan and I could have some time together without anybody bothering us. And we picked up a resource just like that. And even at 35 years of marriage, we used a little tool to ignite some conversation for us that just moved us in some directions. Half the time you don't know where you're going to end up, but the point is the journey is accelerated by the question. Mm-hmm. It moves you forward, and so that's really great. Okay, so what precautions, though, would you give couples? Because we all know when you're happy, you love to talk. And you can bring up stuff and let's share our joy and our dreams. But sometimes there's stress in the background, and maybe it's between you, maybe it's about your family, maybe it's about the mother-in-law or the former spouse or whatever it is, and you got to do some business together in these conversations. Like what precautions or boundaries would you put around it to help couples in stressful times manage that well?
Yeah, so one thing I put in almost every single book is kind of this preference as long as the two of you are drawing closer together and having fun, you're absolutely doing it right. And so it doesn't mean everything has to be drawing you closer together. Not everything has to be fun, but as long as you ultimately end up there. And so I would say the precaution is not going with the mindset of we've got to get on the same page right now. We've got to fix it right now. Because guys are fixers. At least most of us are, right?
That's right.
And sometimes I've learned from Jenny, it's just about the listening too. In fact, one thing that I love that she'll do is sometimes she'll talk and she'll touch me on the arm and say, Jed, I just need you to listen right now. And first time she did it was like my aha moment. Because, I'm a therapist, I'm a coach, and I'm a guy. So why on earth would anybody bring a problem to me unless they wanted me to fix it? At least that's how my mind worked at the time.
That's right. I could so relate to that, brother.
Yeah. And so now it's more of that, realizing that I can enjoy the process. And part of it is listening to understand. And then every now and then, Jenny will reach out and say, oh, and I want your feedback on this. In which case I'm like, yes. I get to go into fix-it mode.
And how great of you, Jenny, to help clarify your need for him in those moments. Sometimes I just need to listen. Sometimes, I need some problem solving.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the most helpful pieces of advice that we received early on in our marriage was, there can be some heated conversations that come up and some points of conflict, and especially with some of the challenges that blended families face. And so really learning to communicate what we need from the conversation has been really helpful. I would say also like setting boundaries around it. And so knowing that, a lot of times these conversation starters and things like that, they're pretty benign, so to say, conversations, but there are times that we'll get, that might lead to a conversation that is getting a little deeper or might be hitting on some, high emotion areas and things like that. And in couples that we work with, also knowing that it's okay to walk away as long as there's that reconnect. And Jed really describes that too as kind of that Velcro that you're always reaching back, you can separate, but you're always coming back together. And so knowing that there are times that you might have to walk away from the conversation and just take a breather, but coming back together is the key on that.
Yeah. Now, some of the conversations, and we're going to actually walk through a couple of them just so our listener can get a sampling, but some of them are fitting for couples to have dialogue. Some of them are family conversations. And I suppose there could be different combinations of whose kids and how many are in the room and that sort of thing. You got to use your discretion about that. But Jenny, help the step-parent listening for a minute who goes, oh yeah, that's when I feel really uncomfortable. The family conversations, the kids are in the room, and I'm just really unsure of my place there. do I really have to be a part of that? What would you say to that person?
I think I would say yes. As a step parent and a part of leaning into that role is stepping into it with your family. And so it may mean early on that, Jed often took the lead on those conversations. And especially if they were more difficult or if they were around roles and traditions that were already kind of established or anything that might be kind of potentially upsetting for the girls, allowing him to take the lead on that, which for me was hard because I'm a bit controlling sometimes. And so it can be hard.
No, I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. I really do, because that's consistent with what we teach. And that is that, especially early on in your family journey, biological parents should take the lead, especially around subjects that may be a little uncomfortable, because children need to see that their parent is taking this seriously and that they're kind of driving the bus. And so for you, it's intentional step back to let him take that initiative. You're still part of the conversation and have a voice that's very important. So it's not about silencing. It's simply about who steps forward first in the eyes of the children. And so I appreciate you doing that, but I do understand it can be difficult.
It can. And I think it helped to start thinking about it as that supporting role. It wasn't that I wasn't a part of an important part of the conversation, because that's initially how it felt, is that my voice wasn't as important. And that really was a process of shifting that mindset and understanding that my role right now was to support Jed, sometimes to support BioMom, to support this family. And because for us, my stepdaughters were so young when we were married. And so over time, I've been more and more active in those conversations. But even still, there are times where it is appropriate to step back and Jed become the lead again. And just allowing for that space, for them to hear from Dad before they hear from me.
Can I say with that, though, that stepping in is so important, and I'm glad you did it. And with being a stepmom, there's times you take the lead and you need to take the lead, and I'm glad you do. And I'll give you a couple specific examples. Some you needed to take the lead on pretty quick because we were dating, dropped our kiddos off at Sunday school one day, and now I realize that I did indeed take one of our daughters to church Sunday morning in her pajamas. I thought it was a great looking princess dress. And Jenny, unfortunately, got the heat for that.
It's entirely acceptable for a dad to bring their daughter in pajamas.
Yeah, it's funny how those double standards work, isn't it?
It's not okay for mom to do that. So.
But immediately Jenny stepped in and, clothing-wise, fashion-wise, hair-wise, was able to bring something there was just no way I was going to bring. And now our daughters are 12 and 14, and there are conversations with 12 and 14-year-old girls that moms and stepmoms are way more equipped to have than us dads. And every single dad listening is going to know exactly what those conversations are, where it's, that is where mom and stepmom absolutely need to step in. And so, one, I love that you gave some, room and some space and let me take the lead at times. But I'm so thankful there's other times you take the lead, because I just have no clue.
Well, and I think also being in that supporting role allowed the girls to accept, they control a little bit now who takes the lead. They choose who to go to with what questions they have as their comfort level as teenagers allows.
Right.
But I think if I had tried to force that and tried to be kind of a dominant force in their life, that comfort level wouldn't be there. And there might still be some of that tug of war rather than the comfort level that I'm here to support.
Let's sample a couple of the questions. Again, there's 131. So to our listener, if you like any of this and you think, boy, that could be helpful, there are more questions in this book for you to pursue. Just pick up a copy. So I love this one. Posing this to the family, I can imagine. It could be just a couple talking about it, but it could be the family as well. What What stepfamily, real or fictitious, do you look up to and why? Now, what do you imagine would be the benefit potentially for a family talking through that question?
Yeah, you need heroes and need a picture in your mind of really what you're striving to be and who you want to be. I've heard the phrase over and over again, if you aim at nothing, you're going to hit it every single time. I think especially for us guys, when it comes to TV sitcoms and shows we watch, it's pretty typical for dad to be the goofball or the one who's fumbling everything. And so us guys especially need that guy in their mind who's leading his step family well. And just having that mental imagery of that's where I'm going, that's where I'm headed. Because for me, that's super helpful when I feel stuck.
Yeah.
Just to picture that person and be like, oh, wait a minute. That's the direction I want to be.
Yeah. I think for me, the other important piece of that, is exactly that, needing to have those good role models. And I think so much in media, stepmothers especially are portrayed as evil, right? It's always the evil stepmother. And so both for me, knowing powerful and just healthy examples of what a stepmom looks like, that intentional seeking that out. And then also for kids to know step families who function well and who are healthy, rather than their portrayal being that, that there's something wrong or something broken about the family.
Yeah. Yeah, those are good. I immediately can see the benefit and have many times had conversations with people where you pose a question like this, and you're now going to get the kids' sort of projection of how they see themselves and how they see their family. Mm-hmm. If they say, well, I can relate to this TV show or this family in a movie, you're kind of learning something about how they view themselves, this family, the dynamic there. There's something they can relate to. And go ahead and press into that and just say, so which character would you be? And who am I? And what fits and doesn't quite fit who we are? And I think that's a great way to let children talk about how they feel without them having to say, this is how I feel.
Yes.
I think it could be very revealing and just allow you to learn something about the kids, their point of view, and then dialogue around those heroes and who we're working to become. And all of that becomes a shared vision for where you're headed as a family.
Yeah, exactly. I think oftentimes those conversations for kids can feel a little threatening, or often make them feel like they're in the middle, or I have to say something about my family that's going to, please the parent. And so allowing that conversation to happen in a different format where they can feel free to express a little bit about what they're feeling without it being so direct.
Here's another great question. Let's just do one more. If you had a magic wand and could instantly change one thing about our family, what would it be? What do you see happening with that question?
It's a dreaming question. Just kind of that idea of scheming, dreaming, and it might be there's a problem to get rid of and something that needs to be addressed. Might be something that everybody's aspiring to in the future. And that's something that we found in our family that's been a lot of fun, is to really sit down at the beginning of the year and just cut out pictures of where we want to go that year individually, and then as a family. There's a lot of power in just scheming, dreaming, laughing, and planning together.
Yeah, there's a lot of power too in those miracle questions, both for that dreaming and scheming, but also if there is something going a little sideways, giving that, again, a non-threatening way to be able to identify it.
As a dad, I can totally relate to that. There have been so many moments as a father where I hear something out of the mouths of one of my children and I think, I had no idea that was occupying their mental space. That's a concern on their heart. That's an anxiety. Like, it's just out of sight, out of mind. There's so many things going on inside our kids that we really don't have a direct connection to. And so a question like this may give you some insight into what they're, wrestling with in life. And all of a sudden it's like, you can attend to that. Whereas before, I didn't have a clue. I'm not attending to what they need. I'm just living in my own little world. Guys, this is good stuff. Let me encourage our listeners to pick up a copy of this book and to put it to work. Again, throw it in the glove box, like Jed said, or keep it handy just on those moments where you just want a little discussion starter. Maybe it's over dinner every once in a while. you pull one out, here's the topic of the night, and who knows how the dialogue and that journey of talking through something together helps to create a sense of connection and familyness and co-create that identity that you're looking and longing for and striving for as a family. So thank you for this work, and we appreciate what you do. You've been listening to my conversation with Jed and Jenny Jurchenko. I'm Ron Deal, and this is Family Life Blended. You know, I did have one more question for Jed. We'll hear his answer to that in just a minute. But first, I wanted to give you a little warning. Well, not really a warning, I guess. More like a heads up. You know, sometimes great conversation starters like these uncover something you didn't know was there. And before you know it, somebody is upset or defensive or hurt. Don't assume that that's necessarily a bad thing. You'd rather have those hurt feelings revealed than remain under the surface, right? But yes, temporarily you do feel blindsided when that happens and a little out of control, and there might need to be some repair going on between relationships. But even this is an opportunity to listen and show care to one another. Get to the bottom of it and move your family forward. So if and when you uncover something heavy during one of these conversations, view it as a gift. It may take a while to appreciate it, but nevertheless, it's a gift. If you'd like more information about my guests, you'll find it in our show notes, or you can check it out on the Family Life Blended podcast page at familylife.com/blended podcast. And while you're there, make sure you check out everything Family Life has for your marriage and family. Our division, Family Life Blended, has the world's largest collection of resources for step families, including my Smart Step Family series of books and curriculum. My one-year devotional daily encouragement for the Smart Step family is a great resource to ignite even more conversations for couples about their life together as a blended family. On our website, you can also learn about local and virtual events that you can attend. So check it out. The show notes will tell you how. Hey, you know you can leave a review, right? Nettie says, I'm not the only one. Apparently, it's normal to feel this way. Such amazing resources and tools to help my family and for us to help others. They have been a blessing to us, and with God's help, we can be a blessing to others. You know, Nettie, I think you're onto something there. You can be a blessing to others. Maybe just share this podcast with someone. Or if you really want to get equipped to help others, you can attend our Summit on Step Family Ministry. Each fall, we put on this ministry equipping conference that helps pastors and lay couples alike understand more about step family living and what your church can do to impact others. We'd love to have you join us. Visit summitonstepfamilies.com to learn how. That's summitonstepfamilies.com. And if you haven't subscribed to this podcast yet, you can on the new Family Life app, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Family Life Blended. Now, before we're done, a final word from Jed. I asked him what advice he would give to children in a blended family, and here's what he said.
Yeah, so for our family, when it comes to what did our kids do that really moved the needle the most for them in the step family, I think it was looking for the bonuses. Because there's a lot of stuff that's really hard. Moving back and forth from house to house is really hard. Sometimes even just sharing that you are in a blended family or step family is hard. But now kind of that bonus word is used a lot. And our girls got you a cup not too long ago that said best bonus mom ever. And it's just fun to see their faces light up when they find the bonuses. The bonus grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, you being their bonus mom, and some of the bonus fun stuff that they get to do because they are in a step family. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of hard things about being in a step family, but there's some really cool bonuses too.
Wow, what a great idea. Have recurring conversations in your home about the bonuses people get to experience, highlight them, and celebrate them when they happen. Next time, we're going to hear from Jerry and Lori Pullett Short about grace-filled step parenting.
There are a lot of parents that are afraid to apologize or have to be right all the time. And they don't go back and say, you know what, I missed there. And I wish I could have been better. I wish we could have been better.
That's Jerry and Lori Pullett Short next time on Family Life Blended. I'm Ron Deal. Thanks for listening. And thanks to our Family Life Legacy partners for making this podcast possible. You can help us produce this podcast and other resources by making a tax-deductible donation specifically for Family Life Blended by just going to familylife.com/blended podcast and clicking the donate button. Or, if you'd rather, just look in the show notes for a link. Our chief audio engineer is Keith Lynch, Bruce Goff, producer. Our mastering engineer is Justin Adams, project coordinator Ann Ancaro, and theme music provided by Braden Deal. Family Life Blended is produced by Family Life and is part of the Family Life Podcast Network. Pursue the relationships that matter most.